name is Jessica Hartman. I'm here with my co-host Savannah Ray, and we have a really exciting episode today. Our podcast is really heavily based on reptiles. Today we're going to mix it up a little bit. We're going to be talking about permaculture, and we have guests Ellie and Michael of Home Gardeneers. So they're going to talk to us a little bit about growing some food and how we can do that at home, because I know Savannah and I both have reptiles that eat a ton of veggies and greens. So anytime we can produce that at home is always a good thing. Ellie, do you want to start us off and tell us a little bit about your business and how you guys got started?
Yeah, so we started Home Gardeneers pretty much because we were gardening ourselves in our backyard. And when we started off, there was no one to help us. And there's a lot of resources online, and those are good, but not many of them are specific to exactly where a person is living. And so we wanted to help people in our area to kind of get a handle on things, since we didn't have that when we started off.
That's awesome. I know a lot of people, I think around the time of when the pandemic first hit and everyone was at home, started gardening a lot or trying to grow their own food. I know we did. We started with fruit trees, and even that was really difficult, trying to figure out what would grow here, what would make it through the heat. And so that's awesome, I think. Do you see that your guys' business has picked up since the pandemic?
Yeah, I'd say, we started it right before the pandemic, but it definitely has helped out a lot. As you were saying, when people started, seeing a shortage of foods in the grocery stores, we started to be able to, help fill that void. And people were looking to do anything from, super large farmlands to really small gardens. But just all around the board, people are way more interested in it, and they see the viability of it.
Yeah, that's really interesting, especially that you said I kind of thought that when a lot of my friends started gardening and I started to see a lot of the trends on social media, I kind of thought people were just at home and they wanted something fun to do and with their families and to get outside a little bit more. But my husband and I were talking, and he said that he had a discussion with one of his friends, and he really felt that a lot of this is maybe like a natural instinct of ours. Before the food shortage was starting to happen and inflation has now happened. I know the price that I pay for romaine lettuce for our tortoises has gone up double in the last few years. So he kind of said that, and I thought this is really interesting, that he thought it was something like a natural instinct in us that's kind of pushing us to do a lot of more gardening at home, because it's something that our ancestors did, and our generation is really one of the first generations that's kind of went away.
Oh yeah, you're totally right. And that's almost all of our success as humans is from us learning how to farm and cultivate the land. And we went to cities because the farmers were outside of the cities, and we all just lost touch of that. And I mean, when you have reptiles or something like that needs a specific plant or something, it becomes so visible, our disconnect between it. And it is something that's, in all of us. You bring anyone out, young or old, and you just see them just spark up and they just become so happy. It's like having someone try fresh fruit. It's like they've never tried it before. They can't get that from the grocery stores. So it's just amazing being able to share that with people.
I definitely agree with that. I am actually from Florida, but I kind of bopped around. My husband's a chef, and we met in Portland, Oregon, and a lot of people were doing the front yard gardens there. And we actually lived in Decatur, Georgia briefly, and we picked an apartment complex specifically because they allowed us to do a raised bed garden in the front. And it was so cute to be able to go around the apartment complex, and everybody was growing different things, and neighbors were interacting because they were gardening, trading seeds or trading secrets about that sort of thing. And definitely growing up in Florida, we would go and pick wild blackberries, and tasting a wild blackberry versus what you see in the grocery store are just completely night and day. So, being able to grow fruits like that, and vegetables and things like that, you can really taste the difference. Also with farming, they do soil tests. We're really interested in all this subject, but there's not the nutritional content that we used to have. And it's funny because everybody's really into the quinoa and these ancient grains. And the only reason that they have these higher vitamin levels is because they haven't been massed farmed for all these years. So definitely like doing it yourself is a big deal. So are there particular, do you help with the planning? Do you help with nurseries? Do you have particular plants? Because we're in the Florida area that you suggest. Your placement of plants, is that really important? What do you think the keys are to permaculture? And we didn't even define it. What for the layman here, what exactly is permaculture? What's the definition?
Permaculture is being able to live off the land as it is, not importing all these tons of chemical fertilizers and all these pesticides and things that people have created, through scientific methods, and have to be mass produced to be able to protect the land, protect it from pests, but it's to just sustain yourself as it is with what you have to work with. So composting, natural sources, things like that.
Gotcha.
Yeah, a lot of it's about, a lot of what we do is just teaching people how to look at everything differently. You have, the soil, and you have the plants, you have the water, and, everyone thinks about NPK and all that kind of stuff. But there's so many other, nutrients that aren't in that, there are 97 other or so nutrients that these plants need. And then when people start, revolving their lifestyle around understanding how soil produces nutrients and how they can help that cycle, how they can make these microorganisms, just naturally facilitate themselves rather than, doing all this, extreme stuff and being very, specific with what they're doing. It's just about, learning about how the land cultivates itself and, just putting plants out there and having the right kind of ecosystem and everything like that.
Mm-hmm. What about mycelium? Oh, I'm sorry. No, I got really overexcited because one thing that I really liked, and I'm sure you guys have found, is that the more you do this, kind of like with Jessica and I working with reptiles, you can take this information and you can actually, it's a lot, it's also transferable in a lot of different aspects of your life, basic principles, hot and cold, open, close. But one thing that it's like I've learned about that I've always really liked is there's fungus among us, but mycelium freaks me out. I think it's so cool. And like we're on the internet now and, we've got kind of a man-made version of what mycelium does naturally. So, what are your favorite parts and do you like mycelium and how do you feel they fit into soil?
Mycelium is actually one thing that we haven't delved as much into that basically has to be done with spores versus seeds. And so we're a lot more seed based. Now, mycelium breaking down soil is completely vital to what we do though, because we use mushroom compost a lot in our principles of growing. And so if you don't know what mushroom compost is, basically it's a lot of animal manure, hay, gypsum, a couple other compounds, and mushrooms grow on top of it naturally because that's what they eat. But then as the process goes and the mushrooms break down that material, it becomes like this nice loamy substrate, and it's totally filled with nutrients that the mushrooms didn't take up. And so what you're eating at the grocery store, those mushrooms, they're done and finished. But what's left behind as a byproduct for these mushroom facilities is mushroom compost. And so you might see those for sale at Lowe's or Home Depot or whatnot. Sometimes it's mixed into different gardening soil blends. But in our company, we actually use pure mushroom compost in its most broken down form after about 9 months. And it is just the blackest, richest dirt possible. So while we don't grow mushrooms
that yourself, I'm sorry.
We don't make it ourselves. There's a facility located very close to us, and it covers all of the Southeast. It's called Monterey Mushroom, and they produce it in large amounts. And so pretty much any mushrooms that you get at the grocery store, like the common ones, like the button mushrooms, portobellos, they're all coming from this one facility that's right here. But they have all this byproduct that they can't use anymore that is fantastic for farming, and that's what we use.
Yeah, we got some of that. We got a huge, I think it was like 10 yards delivered to our house. And let me tell you, my dog could not have been happier jumping through that mushroom compost. So it was real fun.
Yeah,
like
animals definitely it.
They'll eat it, they'll roll in it. Yeah.
Oh yeah, he loved it. So
Jessica and I have a byproduct that you can use from the reptile industry. Do you know what it is, Jessica?
No,
It's
what are you talking
actually
about?
one of the
Worms?
best fertilizers in the world.
Worms?
Worm frass.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we work with superworms and mealworms, and the frass from that, if you actually put it in your plants, it triggers the plant into thinking that it's under attack by the worm. So the plant actually fortifies their cell walls and they shoot down new roots and they actually produce more fruits and flowers. But you do have to be careful with it because you can actually deform it'll actually overproduce and look a little weird afterwards. But yeah, I love it. It's like a teaspoon or a tablespoon per gallon of water, and you can do it every 4 to 6 weeks. But I'm allergic to it. It makes me.
I know. I hate the worm. I hate it. It smells so bad.
Wow, that's a new one for us. So we're always learning with this. We only know like tip of the iceberg compared to everything that's out there. So that's fascinating.
It is. It's always amazing. Like I said, it's amazing what I've learned in different fields, and it makes a lot of sense. It's full of a lot of nutrients and vitamins, but that's where like even learning about this stuff is just so awesome. So a lot of our listeners are kids, and is there like a project or something? I know my son, speaking of the mushrooms, we've actually bought the mushroom kits, and he loves growing mushrooms, and we've done herbs before. But is there a plant that you feel that's really easy or something to help dive into some, for people here in Florida, what you think or what got you started?
I would say like a project for kids that would be fun and super educational. It shows the whole cycle of the plant, which super high success rate are green beans. Green beans, super easy. You buy a pack of seeds, plant the seeds, the plant will grow, and the pod, the green bean that you eat, if you let it go fully to maturity and you let it, harden and die off on the plant, you just crack open the pod and you plant those seeds again, and the cycle starts all over again. And it could teach children how to save seeds and just how the whole process happens. And not all plants produce flowers and shows pollination, but this one does too. So if they're nearby, they could see the bees around it, they can see how pollination occurs. It's just the perfect like starter plant. I mean, not just for kids, but for anyone really.
And a good add to every meal. We love the green beans. We just had green beans last night, actually. That's funny. So you guys have your business. If somebody wanted to reach out to you and work with you, what's the best way of getting a hold of you guys? And how does that process work with working with you guys? So let's say Jessica or I, we're looking to kind of my whole backyard's full of guinea pig poop. So I've got perfect fertilizer. So I actually have a perfect area to grow in. So I guess like with me, I have like a 10 by 8 foot growing space. What would be, it's partial sun. So what would you suggest that I do? And how would it be to work with you to do a consultation, to be a client?
Right. So what we do, we work in the local area within sometimes we'll extend this, but we like to stay within the 30-mile range of kind of like the Orlando area. So Central Florida, sometimes we'll go out as far as to like Daytona or Tampa, but still kind of like in the central area because that's the zone we know best. Gotcha. So when we go out and do a consultation, we kind of gather some information over the phone or through our Facebook page, a little bit about their yard, just kind of what you just described to us there. So we have an idea of what we're working with. Because there are some situations, people want to grow plants and they want to garden, and then they're on their balcony, and then it's like, okay, well then we do a different system, like a tower or something. So knowing what we're working with a little bit beforehand helps us tailor our consultation to your specific situation. So for you in an area that's partial sun, there are tons of things you can still grow there, but you have to know the right ones to grow. So you don't try and grow something that absolutely needs full sun and then you're disappointed. And what you were saying about the guinea pig manure, that stuff is gold. Like that's fantastic, but then you need to know how to break it down in your soil. And this is stuff that we all explain when we come out to do a consultation.
Okay.
And there's so many levels to it too, because there's fruits and vegetables that people don't know about. There's a lot. So people might go in wanting blackberries or blueberries. And then we'll say, hey, you wanted those, but you might be better off with a mulberry tree. They taste like blackberries, or, a Jamaican cherry tree or something like that. And then, because blueberries, you have to, have pine fines and all this other stuff to just have them grow right. And you only get a few blueberries. And that works great for some people. Some people even put them like under pine trees and stuff like that. But a lot of what we do is more like trying to reteach people how to look at gardening, because they think about, they like have an end product of what they're going to get, and it's more about saying, oh, you want vegetables, you know, how about you try this, how about you try that, oh, maybe, you know, you need more space for this. Like I got into this because Ellie had broccoli in her backyard and she was kept bugging me to try it, and I went to try it and it tasted like she put sugar on it. And I followed her around for like 15 minutes being like, what did you put on this? What did you put on this? And she started to get annoyed, like waving me off. Like, come on, I didn't put anything on it. And I'm like, how didn't you? So it's like, I never knew I'd want broccoli like that. So, you know, it's about teaching people like, hey, how the soil works, how to like sustain that, how to take care of the plants. And Ellie she's always looking out for more information. She has like books and books of data that she keeps, and she records the temperatures and everything. So we do all the homework and we do all like the research, and we figure out the stuff about the plants. We travel all around Florida, you know, to make sure that people have all the knowledge that they need going into it. Because we want people to just be able to, you know, throw this stuff in the ground and learn as they go.
And I met Ellie during when we did the TEDx talks together. And something that I learned from her TEDx talk was why food tastes better when you grow it yourself. And I didn't know the process that they use to ripen food. Ellie, can you kind of explain that to our listeners, how they ripen food that we get in the grocery store and why it tastes better when you grow it yourself?
Yeah, so a lot of the times, because you gotta imagine when the food is growing on the tree has everything, you know, or plant, whatever it is, fruit, vegetables. The food naturally ripens and the sugars are put into the food in the last stage. Now, as far as shipping and processing and everything, it takes time to get food from one place to another. There's a lot of our food that comes from South America. And in that shipment time, if the food was already fully ripe, you got to think of it from the plant's perspective. It's making it totally ripe, so it'll drop off the plant and rot very quickly into the ground, and all the nutrients from the part that you would have eaten are what fertilize the seeds that are inside that fruit. So unfortunately, at the stage that tastes the best, it's also the stage that's quickest to perishing. And so people pick the fruits and vegetables off the plants well before they're totally ripe. But because it doesn't have that natural sugar, now they have to do different processes to make it taste like it does have that natural sugar. That's why when you hear people talking about tomatoes, when they home grow them versus buying them at the grocery store, or even oranges, they don't, even when they're ripened with these processes, these chemical processes, it only changes the color on the outside. It doesn't do a whole lot for the inside, because that has to be done naturally while it's still on the plant. So really the only way you can get that fully fresh tasting food is if you're eating it right off the plant.
Yeah, I thought that was really interesting. And that's a big reason. I mean, besides you're saving money and you have more control over the food that you're getting, that's a huge reason, I think, to start growing your own food. We started just with some fruit trees, and we'll probably be contacting you, Ellie, so you can help us with our yard on creating a garden, because that's our next step. We actually just have bananas on our tree now for the first time. I think it's been like 3 or 4 years. So I'm super excited about that. And they're ice cream bananas is what we were told. So they're like, will be blue, and then I guess taste more like a sweeter version of bananas, like ice cream. So we're excited about those. We got plums this year for the first time. Nice. And I know we talked with, oh gosh, what was his name, Savannah? The guy from Crockfest, Flavio.
Yeah, Flavio.
About, he does a lot of permaculture.
He does.
And he was talking about how bad grass is for your yard.
Especially in Florida.
For the ecosystem. Yeah, grass is just horrible. And my husband was kind of saying, like, because he's always been one that always wanted to have a very nice manicured lawn. He spends a lot of time taking care of the grass and cutting it and edging. And after we kind of got into looking into growing our own food, he's like, why do I want to have this grass that does nothing for me when we can have, like, our yard can provide for us? You know, we can put the same amount of effort in and have something that gives back to us. So I think that's a big reason to get into, growing food too.
I
Yeah,
think
well,
that you mentioned mulberries too, and I don't know if you know, but for tortoises and for reptile owners, mulberry is great because our tortoises can eat the leaves. So, Ellie, if you guys have any customers that have any tortoises ever, mulberries are great source because any of our like even bearded dragons, iguanas, any of your green eating lizards love mulberries and they love the fruit too, and I love the fruit too. So I definitely would love it. We only have a little baby pineapple growing right now, so I'm definitely not as green thumbed as the rest of you guys here.
well, and something I want to say too with the mulberries, just a little add on for people who have hamsters or rats or other rodents, is that the wood is actually non-toxic and they can be used as chews for rodents. Because there's a lot of chews, like even ones that are sold at the pet stores, where the wood is carcinogenic to the rodents. So I don't know how they're being sold, but mulberry wood is actually totally natural. And it's a great way for them to have a nice natural chew.
Well, that's
Oh, wow.
awesome. Huh. Learn something. See, we're all learning stuff. I love it. That's what's so exciting about getting to talk to so many different people. That's why we love doing the podcast. And permaculture definitely goes alongside with our reptile keepers. We learn cycles like you guys do in permaculture, and I think that really is very therapeutic for a lot of people. I think in most people's daily lives, we're just so separated from the outside world. We don't even understand about lighting. Like I learned about UVB, and how they actually our reptile bulbs that we use were originally manufactured for humans for working in office spaces because you don't get enough ultra blue lights, and that actually affects your circadian rhythm. So to think if you can spend that time in your garden and have that, it's just neat to see the cycles kind of run together. And I know that a lot of our reptile keepers feel that way too because they kind of get kicked into life cycles. So I mean, permaculture definitely would go hand in hand. And you guys said, how long have you been doing this? What sparked your interest besides just, you said, doing it yourself and not, it seems like that's most people's business startup is, I needed to get it and it wasn't available, so I had to do it myself. So have you guys always had a do-it-yourself attitude?
Well, I started growing food because I had like a slight interest in it. I always kind of wanted to do it. And then, for once in my life, I had a yard to do it. But when times got tough for me, then I started feeling like, okay, if I don't grow my own food, like what if I don't have money to buy food? This is one thing that I can supply. I can't, make gas for my car. I can't, make my house insurance pay for itself, but I can grow my own food. And so that's how I started it. And then me and Michael got together, and like he said, he tasted the broccoli and then he absolutely fell in love.
I also grew up in Satellite Beach during the recession, and I saw engineers, smartest people in the world working at NASA after 5 years, like living in their cars, running through family support and everything. Yeah, I saw that, and, I decided to go into business and, find something sustainable. And, we started doing this before the pandemic. But even then, like, when that kind of stuff came by, like, we would just go around and pick fruit off the sides of the, off little, like, people have fruit trees in their front yards. We'd pick, peaches, whatever they had. And we'd give them out to people that didn't have any food. They were saying on Facebook they needed food because the grocery stores were closed. And like they looked at us like we were their heroes. We're like, we're not doing anything. We're just giving you fruit, like, on the side. And, I went to school for business, and I see that and I'm like, there's no better feeling in the world than being able to give people food. Like, it doesn't matter. Like you said, you had a brown thumb. There's no such thing. There's no such thing. It's in our blood. Yeah, really, it's in our blood. If you have the soil, the right plants, you give it sun, you give it water, and then just pull the weeds a little bit, they will mostly take care of themselves. Like, if you give them the nutrients they need, they'll fight off diseases and bugs better, the same way as we would. If we have nutrients, we fight off diseases. But most people, they get this anaerobic soil from, Lowe's or something, and they put it in the ground. They put their seeds in the ground that, are from Lowe's and they're made for up north. And then their plants die. And then they feel sad and they can't do it. But everyone can do it. It's in our blood.
For sure. It takes the power back to the people too. I don't remember what documentary it was that really first talked about Monsanto's. There was a farmer. My husband's from Kansas, so we actually lived in the Midwest, and it was amazing because you'd think you'd see all these arrays of vegetables everywhere, and you don't. It's corn and soybeans, and it's mainly soybeans. but there was a farmer in, I don't remember, in the Midwest, and he would take with his crops, if they were on the edge of his property, he would take Roundup and he would spray Roundup on the crops because his crops weren't genetically engineered, so they would just die. So it was a way for him to kind of section off his area. And he went to go spray his crops and they didn't die. And he'd actually found out that he was next to a farm that used Monsanto's plants, and they had cross-pollinated with his crop. He was actually then sued by Monsanto's for illegally using their genetically modified seed. So people don't realize that now these companies actually have ownership when they genetically modify these seeds. You take something that you never were allowed to have ownership of, and now you have ownership of it. And with cross-pollination, eventually it'll get to the point where we're not going to have any type of heritage seeds anymore, because they're going to be able to cross-pollinate with everything that's around there. So, you know, the best way to fight that is we're not going to have as much of a likely chance of cross-pollination in a city environment than you will in farmland. So, I mean, you know, that is a good way to secure these seeds, you know, because once they're gone, they could be lost forever, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, I wasn't sure if someone else was talking. But yes, like you absolutely can lose seed varieties. And I don't remember the exact statistic, but I believe it was like 90-something% of corn varieties have been lost because we've only been growing these same highly productive corn varieties for mass populations. But there's so many other beautiful corn varieties that, you know, thank God there's still some around. Like I just planted in my own garden. I believe it was like turquoise blue, astronomy, which like astronomy is like, I believe it was like purple kernels, pink kernels, red kernels, and then the turquoise blue are just, it's a purely blue piece of corn. Like the whole cob is completely blue. And I totally blanked out and wasn't even thinking about the cross pollination. And when I was shucking the husks off the corn last week, they all just were totally different colors. Some were like some of the baby corn mixed with like the turquoise blue. And so they were all pastel. I mean, it was like Instagram worthy of how beautiful these cobs were. And so, but we lose that beauty when we just do monocropping and when we just focus on high production, high production, high production. So yeah, absolutely. Like having your own home garden doesn't just have to be sustaining your family, but it could be sustaining the lineage of these seeds for generations to come. So it could be a lot more than just your own little backyard garden.
Right, for sure. Purity of the air comes to mind too. I know like dust bowls were huge, and even California is struck with a bunch of dust bowls. When you are only using monoculture, they usually are just ripping the entire plant out, which is the worst thing you can do for the soil. They also leave the soil out to the sun for months and months at a time, which bleaches and kills off all of your like microbacteria and organisms in there that are all beneficial. But you do stir up the dust, and the dust travels, and we're actually seeing like parts of Africa where you see higher rates of asthma because of dust, and these are actually being pushed through the trade winds. So it's amazing that you wouldn't even think of things that are happening across the world actually affecting, you know, you all the way across the world. So you know, I'm an asthmatic, and I actually got it as an adult. Here's my inhaler. But I never really thought about it. It never made sense to me. And now you think about it, and I look back at pictures of like the Great Dust Bowl and how we literally created that ourselves, and we're continuing that same process. And if anything, we just expanded the process that created that. So hopefully our future generations really look at leaving monoculture and seeing a way. There's got to be a way we can do higher yields and higher production, but not at such a chemically driven and monoculture, one way. With bananas, you just said, Jessica, you're growing these awesome bananas, but our generation grew up with a banana that's completely extinct now because they only produce that one banana. I can't remember what virus or what disease it got. It wiped out all that variety of bananas. So if you notice at the grocery store, the bananas now are slightly different size size than they were even like 10 years ago, because we don't have that variety anymore. So when it comes to that, those crops that we mass produce are even, even up for extinction, just because they are the only things that are getting attacked by these organisms, and they're being able to unlock these keys, these, their diseases and things like that are getting a chance to be able to just attack that one species over and over again. Whereas, with your monoculture, there's all these different, they're not just attacking the one variety of banana, they're attacking 5 or 6 different varieties. And so it's harder for the bacteria or virus or whatever it is to penetrate and to figure out how to unlock that key to destroy that crop. So, it really, in the long run, it doesn't behoove us to try to stick with monoculture. So, any of you guys listening out there, any kids want to save the world, it's in our food.
And I really liked another thing that Ellie said during her TED Talk that really struck with me, because I always thought I had a brown thumb too. And by the way, if you haven't heard or seen Ellie's TED Talk, we'll link it when we post this podcast. We'll link it because it's amazing and you should definitely watch it. But another thing that she said, because I always thought I had a brown thumb too, and she compared it to driving a car, right, Ellie?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, everyone has to learn. You're not just born knowing how to do this stuff. And even though food is very integral to who we are as human beings, you still have to learn. You have to learn when's the right time to plant stuff and what kind of soil is best. Nobody is born with an instinct on how to grow everything. They're just not.
Kind of, it's because I think people just automatically assume that it's as easy as, planting a seed and watering it, because that's what I think I always assumed. And when you fail, it's hard to fail. And that's something that I think a lot of people have trouble with dealing. So the way that you gave that analogy of, you're not able to drive a car right away as soon as you get behind the wheel. You're not automatically good at it. It takes practice. That really resonated with me, because I'm like, oh, okay, well, I've not really tried. I just killed a couple of plants and I'm like, that's it for me. So I think, my husband, like I said, we've just gotten into the fruit trees. We really haven't dove too much into a lot of the gardening. We've grown tomatoes and some sweet potatoes, but our next venture is really going to be getting into more of the greens. I know I want to grow dandelion greens, and I don't know if that grows in our area, but I can never find those. And those are really good for tortoises and iguanas. So that's on my list. I'm always looking for those. But that's our next step, is to try to get into that. And our trees are really taking off now. We got plums this year. We do have a couple blueberry bushes and blackberry bushes. We don't have any mulberries, so we're going to look into those. But and like I said, we have the banana. I think that's about it for our yard. That's about all our yard can handle right now. And then we want to do a raised garden. So is there any other advice that you can give people about wanting to start their own gardening?
Yeah, I'd definitely say my own opinion would just be start now, even as simple as possible, as small as possible, because it's something that we got away from when we moved to cities. The farms started supplying the cities with food, and then they're like, hey, you guys focus on working in the factories and we're doing all the work. And now it's about time that we get back into it. It's about time that we start, learning as much as we can, so we can pass that down to our kids and have them pass that down to their kids. Because, the successfulness of everyone in the generations to come are going to be based on, of course, their ability to adapt. There's going to be, conflicts over water, even stuff like that. We're going to be facing, these problems are just going to be getting bigger and bigger. And, I'm not, a doomsayer. I'm not saying things are going to happen. I'm just saying, as humans, as you guys were saying, it's in us. And the best thing that you can do is, it's an inertia thing. So if you get that ball moving, then it'll just keep going. Because I swear, the first time you try that little piece of food you grow, I don't care if you're a kid or an adult, you'll be so happy. You're like, I made this. This is my little guy,
And something I want to say about reptiles specifically, my parents actually own a sulcata tortoise, and so they're constantly asking for any scraps, because they eat so much food. And for example, if you're growing cabbage, we really only eat the inner softest leaves of the cabbage. So there's tons of outer leaves that you could feed your reptiles, you know, or like the nopales cactus, like they grow like crazy here in Florida and they don't mind the lacking of nutrients in the soil. And so those pads, sulcata tortoises, eat up like crazy too. And you know, the leaves on a broccoli plant, we only, you know, I don't know how many people out there know this, but broccoli is actually just a bunch of flower buds. So we're only eating the flower bud part of the plant. The rest of the plant is just a byproduct that either, you know, gets thrown away or composted by the farmers, but the leaves can totally be eaten by plenty of animals. Like we have ducks ourselves and we just toss in all the greens for the ducks. So it's not even like you necessarily have to specifically grow the food for your pets. It's you'll have so much byproduct, you'll need to do something with it. So you feed it to your pets and then they in turn give you fertilizer for it. So in a way they pay you back and then you put it back in your soil. It's an entire ecosystem that you can build in your own backyard.
That's awesome. I think that's a really good point. I think also want to point out too, for people who are like living in apartments and weren't as, I guess, fortunate as I was to be able to garden outside of your apartment with the approval of the apartment complex. But we did microgreens, and microgreens were something that we did with a little grow light. We set up a little wire stand table and had, you can use Tupperware. We just had a little bit of soil. We got seeds in bulk. We had a lot of success with arugula, and we had for the reptiles, we did mustard greens, which are very spicy when they're babies. And we did collard greens, and we would grow those up and then cut them off. And they have 5 times the nutritional value leaf per leaf of the adult counterpart. So if you're thinking about a giant like stalk of, you know, collard greens, one big leaf of it, this tiny little microgreen that's itsy bitsy has 5 times the nutritional value. So if you have, we talked with keepers, it's not always good to overdo nutrients, but I think it's a good idea to be able to give that to picky eaters or things that want more vitamins, or for us, or maybe you don't like to eat your vegetables. I always like to just sprinkle the microgreens on our food, but it also makes all your food look really fancy. So I highly recommend getting into microgreens. That was really fun for us. We enjoyed doing that.
Another thing I could bounce off of that is also sprouts. So making sprouts in jars, which is super easy to do too. So the microgreens, they require a little bit of dirt, a little tray, and you put those on your windowsill. But there's also another option that doesn't require any soil, and that's literally getting a mason jar and getting the seeds. And there's seeds that are better for this than others, but you know, like things in the brassica family, like broccoli and whatnot. You pop those seeds in the jar, fill it with a little bit of water, swish the jar around, and then you drain the water out. And you just leave the jar there on your windowsill. And then every day you do this, and you refresh the water, and then you drain it out, and the sprouts will start growing. But since there's no soil, they're not dirty, it's totally clean. And after, you know, depending on what it is, but between like 15 to 30 days, you have this huge jar of just tons of sprouts. And it's just all compacted right there in the mason jar. So you can just pull them out and eat them straight, put them on your sandwiches, but then you don't have to worry about any of the dirt or anything either if you have a smaller space. So that's also another option.
I actually got a sprouter. It was a tiered one. My husband got it for me for my birthday because I was using jars and I loved it so much. But it was like probably like a 4-tiered system with a drain bucket. It was only about this big around and about the size of a medium or like a salad plate. And you would just water through it, and you did that 2, maybe 3 times a day, and you just pour the water through it, and it would go through each of those little reservoirs, and then it would fill at the bottom. And we would do mung bean sprouts. That's the big ones you're used to on your salads. And then I really like sprouting lentils. I like doing the black beans, and we were doing beans for soup, like kidney beans. I know one thing that was really good was sprouted chickpeas for hummus. That was really good. And if you're looking to like lower your carbohydrate intake and up your protein, when you sprout your beans, it brings it all back to life, which is also better for you, but it also ups the protein in it, and it lowers the carbohydrates because the plant is actually breaking down those carbohydrates to actually produce the new sprouts. So, and I definitely love the sprouts. I need to start doing that again. It was one of my favorite things to do. Definitely. Thank you for bringing that up. But yeah, sprouts are awesome and super inexpensive. Like I was really sprouting when I was a young mom and we were really budgeting and I was trying to figure out ways to really, like you were saying, it was kind of like do or die. Like I have this food, how can I make it last? How can I make it better? And beans were something that were really affordable for me, and sprouting them made them so much, I don't know, more exciting. And it was definitely funner to eat the sprouts. And I definitely highly recommend this sprouted hummus. It's really, really good.
Cool.
It's cool seeing people excited about gardening and about growing even just sprouts,
Yeah. Makes you feel like a kid, man. And that's the cool thing about it is like you feel like you lose touch, but when you get into growing stuff, like I think you guys realize, and I think that's why you changed your whole life around it, just like with me working with animals. And I think Jessica working with animals, when you realize that you can be really passionate and be successful at what you're passionate about, it changes your life, and growing vegetables and things like that was actually something that I was really into at first, and then I kind of moved into the reptiles. But I definitely am more successful at things that can go and move and get their own food versus me having to bring it to them.
There you go.
Well,
I love hearing your story. It's so amazing. Sorry, Jessica, I'm so bad at cutting.
Oh, no, it's okay. We just want to thank you guys so much for coming on, and it was so great talking to you, and I think we both learned a lot, and I know our listeners did too. So tell us one more time, where can we find you, your company name, what if you're on Instagram or Facebook, or you have a website, how do we get a hold of you?
Yeah, so the best way to get a hold of us is through our Facebook page, which is Home Gardeneers, spelled HOME space GARDENEERS. And if you type that in, our page comes up and you can message us directly on there. Like we said earlier, it's all of the Central Florida area. So if you live anywhere pretty much between Tampa and Daytona, we're here to help.
And we are happy to talk about whatever you want to talk about as far as gardening goes. We're happy to give you whatever advice you're willing to give. Of course, we do like in-person consultations and everything else, but it's about being happier, healthier, and stronger, whether it's for you growing a garden or your reptiles, getting them stuff. We just want to spread that. So anything at all, we'd love to help.
That's awesome. Well, thank you guys so much, and we hope you have a great day and happy gardening. I know we've been getting a lot of rain here the last couple of days, so that saved us from having to go out and water.
Yeah, definitely.
But thank you so much.
It was great to have you guys, and we really did love hearing all your knowledge. And we do want to thank you guys so much, and we definitely want everybody to really look at how you can garden better. And I definitely would like to talk to you guys afterwards, because I do educational programs in the school, and I think that you guys could really do a program that could reach a lot of students, especially during the summer, for sure.
Absolutely. Wow, that'd be awesome.
I mean, bringing kids into this is the most important thing, we believe. Showing kids how to grow stuff and bringing them into it, definitely.
Yes.
But thank you so much for having us on here. It's an honor, bringing us on, and it's exciting seeing people that are happy about this kind of stuff.
All right, guys, have a great day.